Time now for our top political story on the buck stops here tonight. The issue of whether India's Christian community has reason to feel unsafe and insecure has become an international talking point. This after a spate of attacks on Christian institutions, including churches, that even led the Prime Minister to express his deep concern. The issue has also got reinforced as some of India's prominent Christians have spoken out. It started with one of India's most respected top cops, Julio Ribeiro, writing an op-ed in which he described himself as threatened, unwanted and a stranger in his own country. A couple of weeks later, you had one of the top educationists of the country, the principal of Mumbai Sophia College, joining the conversation. Dr. Amrit Mahal wrote about how she was shaken in her belief that India is fundamentally a law-abiding country. Now, one of the most respected and influential economists, public intellectuals and thinkers of our time, Professor Jagdish Bhagwati, has weighed in on the debate. Writing in Mint earlier today, Professor Bhagwati dismissed these fears as baseless and called them the product of a fevered imagination. What makes him think so? Joining us now for this Buck Stops Here exclusive is Professor Jagdish Bhagwati, joining us today on the program from New York. A pleasure as always to have you on the program. What made you, Professor Bhagwati, who spoke so strongly against Hindutva hardliners the last time we met in India, decide that this entire narrative that the Christians of India are vulnerable and feeling insecure, that this is a product of a fevered imagination? What makes you conclude this?
Well, thank you for having me on your program again. I enjoyed it last time. And definitely at that time in January when you interviewed me, I had come out very definitely against the Prime Minister not intervening immediately to allay all these fears of several minorities. And I think I had an impact in the sense that the Prime Minister did go on then, as you pointed out, to make statements like the one he has made in Kerala to reassure the Christian community. Even if objectively it didn't need to be done, leadership requires that if some community is actually upset and worried, that you go ahead and reassure them, because that's the only way to function in a democracy. Of course, some people will say, well, we shouldn't do that because there's no objective truth to what's being asserted, but that's not the way you manage public policy. And I was delighted that the Prime Minister went ahead and did what he did. But the reason why I wrote this particular piece, which you referred to in Mint yesterday, was because I think, objectively speaking, and that's what I'm addressing now, objectively speaking, I've looked at all the assertions by the people you mentioned, and particularly Mr. Ribeiro, who is a widely regarded and respected figure. When I saw that he was saying he now felt he was on a hit list, and I could not believe what I was reading. When I looked at this very lovely article by Rupa Subramanya, who is a widely respected economist, come columnist, come reporter, and she's cited in several places like New York Times, etc. And she had looked at all the incidents which were actually listed as the ones which in Delhi showed that that in fact the Christian churches were being attacked, a Christian school was being attacked. And if you read that article, which was on First Post, it's impossible to conclude that there was anything really anti-Christian in all of this. Like if I'm passing by a church and throw a stone through the window, that would be vandalism, right? And it could also be attack on a particular Christian church. But she found that in cases which were investigated, 6 of them, I think, that in fact there was no evidence for that. In one case, people were playing ball and the ball had gone through a window. In another case, there was a dare by people who are drunk and to do something like vandalism like this and get away with it. And so all of this has been documented. I'm not saying that probably there is something, but you take the number of temples in India, the number of mosques in the city of Delhi itself. They're far greater in number, the far greater numbers of attacks of burglary, etc. here. So I felt that really one needed to bring some sanity into this discussion and to really point these things out and say that, look, the principle which we have of monkey see, or rather say monkeys say something and monkey repeat it. So if you keep repeating again and again that the Christians are under attack, then a lot of Christians, good-hearted Christians, will begin to believe it. Then when Mr. Ribeiro, you know, who's a very sane and much admired figure, says he's on a hit list, and says that Hindus are now doubting, you know, his Christianity and his loyalty and so on, and then he actually ends his article by saying how a number of people who came up to him and recognized him somewhere in this, you know, near Lonavala or something, and said, "Oh, Mr. Ribeiro, you know, you're the great." That is contradicting himself. How come people go and say such nice things to him if the Hindus are turning against him? So I just wanted to introduce a little contrary point of view so that we would have a reasonable debate and argument as against just simply repetition of fears which become self-fulfilling.
But, Professor Bhagwati, you framed your argument, and now allow me to be a little contrary with you. You mentioned Rupa Subramaniam's article, but the Delhi police has not yet conclusively given its verdict on whether there's a larger pattern here. Many of the cases are still under investigation. I put it to you that when attacks on churches take place in a larger political context, where issues like conversions, slogans like Ghar Vapsi, where the Home Minister is saying there should be a national debate on whether we need conversions at all. You know, when the political noise surrounding certain incidents is so loud and so inflammable sometimes, then that act of violence, which may have been seen as a law and order problem at some other point, is being correlated by the Christian community to the surround sound. The noise around conversions, for example, the slogans of Ghar Vapsi, for example. Do you believe that those slogans are enhancing the insecurity legitimately of the Christian community?
Well, you see, you have to take into account the fact that the Christian community itself is into conversion. Now, so is the Muslim community. It's very interesting that Dr. Ambedkar, who is one of our most revered constitutional lawyers, as you know, that when he decided to go have the Dalits, who are oppressed people, change their religion, why did he not pick Islam or Christianity? He picked instead Buddhism. Because Buddhism is not into conversion in the way in which these two religions are. So my point of view is that it is crazy on the part of people who are out to convert all the time to say you cannot convert. I mean, there are a few crazy people on the Hindu side who feel that we should reconvert. Well, how much does it amount to? Very little. On the other hand, if you take the entire history of the church, you see, in fact, massive attempts at conversion. And actually, it is interesting, I would urge these people whom you are citing on the Christian side, because, you know, many of them have not read anything, in my judgment. Just last week, you go back to 1492 in Spain, and there it was the Catholics coming in from the north who basically expelled the Jews and the Muslims, ending over 500 years of tolerance on the part of the Muslim rulers. This is very well established. And last week alone, the Spanish government said the descendants of those Jews who were expelled will be able to come back to Spain under certain conditions.
Sure.
Now, I urge these Christian leaders to go and look at their own history of conversions and so on, and say, look, we are into conversion, often forced conversion historically. Here are a few Hindus, because Hindus are not into conversion in any substantial way at all. And if some people want to reconvert or convert, that doesn't amount to a hill of beans, in my opinion. So I would just clarify and say, look at your own history and relax a bit. If you think you can convert, why do you object to other people saying they can convert?
But
I mean, I don't believe in Hinduism that converts. Hinduism, in my view, is inclusive, not exclusive.
Well, Professor Bhagwati, Hinduism has not been inclusive in terms of its trenchant caste system, which is what has forced many people out of it. So let's first acknowledge the caste hierarchies that have created inequities. We have to acknowledge those.
No, that's a separate issue, Barkha, in the sense that Hinduism it is ridden with caste structure.
Yes.
Absolutely, and this is why the Dalits who are oppressed at the very bottom, and which Dr. Ambedkar was, working for, they naturally, have to revolt. So this is why also I'm not in favor of people who talk about Hinduism sort of great virtues and so on, by referring to the Vedas and so on, because that is theory at the high end. If you really want to see how Hinduism has worked, you have to go exactly as you were saying to the sociology of it, at the village level. And this is why, Ambedkar did not want village autonomy, because to him that meant that old caste structure would continue to be dominant. And so I think, we have no quarrel on that. I'm not extolling the virtues of Hinduism, far from it. But all I'm saying on the issue of conversion, I don't think that a religion which is known for centuries of forced conversions, torture, I mean, you just have to read the history of Christianity and certainly of Islam. I'm not giving you a balanced view, but I'm simply saying the churches are, and wherever you have the Catholic Church, I was just sitting, have a very mixed bag. And therefore, I don't think my Christian friends should really go off into saying, you cannot convert, but I can. That doesn't make sense to me.
Allow me to push you a little more on this. When the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat, Mohan Bhagwat, that name should mean something to you, because all the editorials say Modi needs Bhagwati, not Bhagwat. So that name should mean something to you. When Mohan Bhagwat,
I saw that.
When Mohan Bhagwat says that people who come back to Hinduism, reconvert to Hinduism, is like a homecoming. It's not a conversion, it's a homecoming. It's ghar vapsi. The metaphor he used in one of his speeches was to draw an analogy with a thief and say that if somebody steals our material, chori ka mal he called it, and we take it back, that can't be called conversion. Do you not believe that these kind of statements add to the apprehensions, add to the insecurities? How do we divorce Mohan Bhagwat's statements on ghar vapsi from the larger fear within the Christian community?
But you have to. I mean, there are cockeyed people everywhere. I mean, I don't think the Prime Minister or I or anybody or you for that matter can defend statements like that, because they're bigoted statements. Like, people should return to Hinduism. I mean, I think I'm happy to condemn it, and I'm glad people are contrasting what I stand for with what Mr. Bhagwat stands. I have read also the speech from which he's widely quoted. I've heard it. It's in Hindi, of course. And some of the statements are taken out of context. It's not as bad as it sounds, much like Wagner's music, where, people said, as you know, the music is not as bad as it sounds. But the point is, you really have to you have to condemn it. And in my opinion, when the Prime Minister came out and reassured the Christian community that there's nothing here which represents government policy. If the government gets into such a policy, then of course I'll be on your side. But that is not, I mean, I can't, people can't be responsible for every crazy statement that's made by somebody.
But you see,
no matter how influential he might be within a certain movement.
I was just going to say it's not somebody, it's the RSS chief, and the RSS is seen as the ideological mentor of the BJP, so it's not just anybody. And I must ask you to take a position on this Ghar Wapsi slogan. Do you agree with this Ghar Wapsi call? Do you believe that if somebody comes back to Hinduism, reconverts, it's... What do you think of Ghar Wapsi? What does that phrase mean to you?
No, what he's saying is religions like, like Muslim, for example, they were the product of invasions, right? Who came in? Presumably you had Hindus before that, or Aryans, whatever you want to call it. So in that sense, sequentially, he's thinking of Ghar Wapsi. But this is not the way to think about modern India or about our history. I would certainly be against the notion of Ghar Wapsi. I mean, look, people have different religions, and if people go from one religion to another, and the guy who has lost some people says, you have to return to my religion, that's what Ghar Wapsi means, and it seems to me to be a ridiculous way to think about the issue. I mean, people are free to choose their religions and so on, so I don't think this is the fact that he's an RSS chief. I mean, look, there are all kinds of people who are into things. Like do I take against the Christian church, which I admire the Christian community, but how many people are aware that the church has been actually, and the Catholic Church has been defending assault on young boys, right? Pederasts, basically. So do I say, look, I'm going to, and some Catholics should continuously denounce that, and why isn't the Archbishop joining in the condemnation, and so on and so forth? That gets into petty problems. I'm not interested in who says what, and then or what his or her position is. I think we really need to relax a bit and say, look, these are unacceptable statements on the part of religious leaders in every community. There are all kinds of problems with religions, in my judgment. I'm a secular person.
Right, Professor Jagdish Bhagwati there, acerbic as ever about Hindutva hardliners, but also calling the Christian response to these sections of the community alarmist and exaggerated. Thank you so much. A pleasure to have you on the Buck Stops here.